Welcome to the Public Land Agency Recreation Leadership Panel. I'm Aaron Bannon. I'm the Executive Director. I'll be serving as your moderator today. I'm happy to answer any questions about the conference or the association if you have broader questions like that. Other than that, we're going to have about a 30-minute panel discussion with our three members, and then we'll have plenty of time for Q&A with all of you. We are recording this session, and we're going to make it available on the AO website after this. So if you do have questions, give me a chance to get to you with the microphone so we can make sure that the video picks up your inquiry. And if that doesn't work out, these folks will be able to repeat your question too. So we'll just make sure that we have something that folks who are watching it afterward can understand and glean something out of. So I'm very pleased to have with us Kurt Rausch. First of all, Chief of the Commercial Services Program at the National Park Service. Been coming to our conference for many years. Old reliable. Good to always have you, Kurt. Thank you. We have Josh Travers. I believe this is your first America Outdoors Conference. Excited to have the BLM continue to represent in an effective way. Josh is the Special Recreation Permit Program Lead at the Bureau of Land Management, Division of Recreation and Visitor Services. And last but certainly not least, home favorite, Ben Johnson, with Assistant Director of the Recreation, it's true, Heritage and Volunteer Services of the U.S. Forest Service. So very pleased to have you all. We'll kick it off with your presentations, and then we'll make some time for Q&A. Kurt Rausch.
Lock the computer.
If it stops, the password is my last name with a capital B.
I have to remember how to spell your last name with a capital B.
Is this you?
No. Yes.
All right. Let's start it. Good luck.
Thank you. Aaron just wished me good luck. A little. I don't really know what that means, Aaron. Well, it's great to be here again. I have been to a bunch of America Outdoors conferences. I was trying to remember the first one. I think it might have been Salt Lake City. Could have been Daytona. Could have been Salt Lake City. It's been 8 or 9 years, so I really appreciate it. It's great to see a lot of you that I've talked to over the years and also a bunch of new faces. So I'd like to just take a few minutes and talk through the Park Services programs that directly impact guide and outfitter communities. It's specifically focusing on commercial use authorizations, which many of you may have, and also some of you may have concession contracts. Just give you an idea on some of our performance activities for 2024, or what we tried to accomplish, maybe even give you a couple of numbers at the beginning about kind of the size of the program. And then some 2025 focus areas and plans. Of course, we're undergoing an administration change, so all bets are off. Things could change quite a bit in the next few months for us, but we believe there's some things that we really want to work forward on, and then obviously take some questions afterwards. So just to give you an idea about what the Park Service manages in terms of overall commercial activities in parks, this is not something I've typically shared, but we are really big business recreational services in the National Park Service. So if you look on the one side, just in terms of total number of authorizations we have about 6,200 commercial use authorizations that we issue across the Park Service system. For guide and outfitter and other tour operations. Leases, we have about 216. These are properties or buildings that we lease that the Park Service has determined that are no longer necessary for Park Service use, but could be used for any number of purposes that are appropriate to have in parks. So it could be residences, it could be commercial activities, it could be post offices, congressional offices, an entire kind of suite of things. And then probably our largest and most complex authorizations are concession contracts. We have a little under 500 of those. Then when you look on the side of kind of revenue, and you are all part of this, our concession contracts generate about $1.8 billion in revenue per year. And the Park Service takes home about 10% of that in concession franchise fees. $1.8 billion is a fairly big chunk of change. CUAs are much smaller, but also really substantial in addition to numbers, but just they generate about $350 million in revenue, for which we take about $4 million in fees. And then leases, we get about $10 million in lease rents per year. So all told, all of that money comes back into the Park Service, and most of it goes back out to support park programs, staffing levels to help manage those activities in parks, as well as maintaining the buildings and resources that are necessary for us to continue to operate. So just thought it'd be useful for you to get a picture of the total scope of operations that we have. So what did we do this last year? Broke it down into three major topic areas: rulemaking, policy and guidance, and data management. So starting with rulemaking, we did a rulemaking for concession contracts, and there was actually issued, it was a Christmas present for me a year ago. On the 28th of December, the department issued a new regulation to manage concession contracts. It's the first time that had been done in about 25 years. We started this last year working on a regulation that would specifically focus on commercial use authorizations. And we kind of got a false start on that. We started to work on it, and there's a group called the Office of Management and Budget that we have to go and talk to about how to develop economic analyses for rulemakings. And when we chatted with them, they had a lot of things that they wanted us to do, and we recognized we weren't going to be able to get it done this year before the administration shifted, and so decided to kind of move that to next year. So next year we'll be working on a regulation which will basically institutionalize the current policies that we have for CUA holders. So it's basically going to take all the policy, if you're familiar with the thing called the Commercial Services Guide, it's going to take that Commercial Services Guide information and then institutionalize it in regulations. There's nothing really new, but it's kind of a step that we should be doing. It was required by statute in 1998, and we just haven't gotten to it. On policy and guidance, the first thing that we did is, as part of the regulatory change for concession contracts, was a strong emphasis on competitive market declaration. The Park Service uses a bunch of kind of means to set rates, particularly for concession contracts, to make sure they meet a statutory requirement to be reasonable and appropriate. But we're trying to, recognizing that the commercial market is much more robust than it used to be, we're moving towards kind of a market pricing approach in most of our, many of our concession contracts. And so concessioners have been asking if they could use this new approach through a process of submitting that request to their park and ultimately to the regional office for approval that allows a little bit more flexibility in how you set rates. The second is labor executive orders. So we're, as a federal agency, kind of compelled to kind of meet the executive order requirements, whatever they might be, at the particular moment in time that we're operating. Right now, as probably all of you are aware, there's an executive order that was issued under the Biden administration that set a federal minimum wage. And that was enjoined for a period of time. That lawsuit settled back in July, and so right now we're continuing to utilize and implement the executive order for federal minimum wage, which means we're basically putting that requirement into our contracts and CUAs. And there will probably be questions about that as we move forward. Another thing that we spent a lot of time on is insurance. The Park Service has a long-standing process for over 30 years of requiring liability and property insurance. But recognizing a strong tightening in the insurance market, there's been several things that we've been working on. One of them is that the Park Service has never allowed waivers of liability. We've allowed acknowledgments of risk, but recognizing several things. One, the tightening of the market, and in some cases, even our insurance consultants have indicated that insurance might not be available in the market without allowing a waiver of liability. And then secondly, kind of reading the writing on the wall, there's legislation that's pending in Congress that would require the Park Service to allow waivers of liability specifically for CUAs. Kind of made sense for us to kind of take that move. And so while it hasn't been officially announced, probably within the next month, we'll have policy out that will allow waivers of liability for simple or ordinary negligence, not gross negligence, but simple or ordinary negligence, which I think you'll find is probably much more consistent with other federal agencies as well as the commercial practice. And we're hoping that that helps in freeing up some insurance limitations that you had. The other thing that we're doing is working really closely with our insurance consultant, and we've got some requests in from America Outdoors on looking at deductible amounts and just kind of how we're structuring insurance, and we're working really hard on that. It is possible that we may be raising deductibles that we set over 15 years ago at $5,000 are fairly low compared to industry norm, and maybe raising them up. And we're working to try to figure out exactly what the sweet spot for that will be. And you may have some questions about that as we move forward too. Managed access in national parks is a huge issue. At this point in time for commercial activities, it's not directly impacting you because commercial operators that have access into parks aren't being controlled through a managed access program, but parks are have huge issues in terms of traffic and other things, and so we in the commercial services program, I'm actually on a work group that sits on every managed access plan that occurs in a park. So whether it's Rocky Mountain or Mount Rainier or Joshua Tree, if they're setting a policy on how they're going to manage access, I sit as part of a team to represent what the potential impacts of that might be to the commercial service community coming in and out of parks. I think it's probably inevitable that we'll continue to do that to manage access, but our intention is to make sure that our team is in place so that we can represent all of you and your interests as that moves forward. Visitor satisfaction is something that I've been working on for a number of years. At this point in time, I don't have any direct input on the quality of services that are being provided out in parks through CUA holders or concession contracts. That information you guys all have because you're all doing surveying to understand your customer experience. But I don't have insight into that. Some of that stays at a park and might come out as a park level report. We've been working over the last few years with several concessioners to pilot an exercise where we'd be able to collect some of the data that you're asking questions of your visitors for, so that we can get a kind of a broader understanding about what visitor experience is like and what their interests are in terms of experience, what they liked and didn't like, and what's working and not working. Right now, we haven't reached out any to the guide and outfitter community. We're focusing predominantly on the front country operations, lodging, food and beverage, retail, and some marinas. But we'll probably be asking for some of you to help us pilot this exercise to make sure we've got a process that would work for you and also be integrated for us. And happy to talk to people about that after. And then finally, we continue in the Park Service to work really strongly on sustainability initiatives. Probably the front and center one for us is plastics reduction. There was an executive order several years ago by the Department of Interior Secretary that was going to phase out plastics by 2032, and we're working, I think it's 2032, right, John? And so we're working to implement programs, again, mostly with the front country operators, but many of you also have plastic products that you're providing to your visitors, and we'd love to work with you to try to phase those out as well, so they have impacts in rivers and streams and many of the places that you operate. The last category is data management. So in addition to the visitor satisfaction process, there are several other things that we're trying to do to have better access to data around what's happening out in parks relative to commercial services. So collecting information on visitation and website information is something that we're really interested in. My boss, Justin Unger, who's the Associate Director for Business Services, manages the fee program for Park Service, that's Floria. He manages all of contracting, he manages all gate entrances to parks, and he's very interested in you, and we have a role in managing recreation.gov, and we're very interested in exploring the way that we could have a single landing spot for parks where we would have access to information on not only all the park services that occur, but also concession activities and CUA activities so that people aren't hunting and pecking to try to find out what services are in parks. Ultimately, these would probably be through APIs that would push back out to your reservation system, so you'd be still managing your client base, but we'd have information and a visitor could do better trip planning than trying to figure it all out with 25 different websites. So those are just a few things that we're working on from the data management side. The one other thing that I wanted to mention was the CUA application and reporting process, which most of you, if you have CUAs, have already started to experience. For traditional CUAs, we tested out a program in 2024 where a select number of parks volunteered to participate in a test pilot where we had an online system for doing CUA applications and ultimately reporting systems. This year for 2025 and moving forward, all CUA holders will be managed through this online portal. We're really excited about it. It seems like it's much more efficient, much faster, much easier for you as well as for us. I'm anxious to hear if you have any commentary on it. I do know that we recently, in the last 2 weeks, had a little bit of a glitch where the system was down for a few days. That has been fixed, so if anybody's got CUAs pending in the system, you ought to be able to get those processed now. And then lastly, road-based commercial tours. These are bus tour operations mostly. We have historically not had CUAs for them, but they do operate in parks, and technically they should have some sort of authorization to do that. And so we are starting to pilot a road-based commercial tour program where those bus tours, similar to Guide and Outfitters, will have a permitting process very similar. They'll actually use the same online system so that we can manage them as we're supposed to by statute. So 2025 plans, continue efforts on insurance. We have a lot of work to do on that. We know we're hopeful that by the end of next year, we'll have been able to look at things like deductibles and self-insured retentions and how to kind of broaden the perspective while still having some core insurance requirements that will address our visitor needs. Addressing minimum wage and wherever that goes, as applicable. We don't really have a crystal ball on exactly what the next administration will do on that, although it's very possible that the executive order, the Biden executive order, will be probably eliminated. Work continuously on the CUA rollout system as well as road-based commercial tours. That CUA regulation, once the next administration kind of settles down a little bit, we'll be able to kind of move out on a new regulation for CUAs, which again, there'll be a whole public comment process for that, so you'll be able to provide input as you look at that and understand what we're trying to do, although most of it's going to be the same as before. And then continuing efforts on things like plastics. And I will turn it over to the next person and look forward to questions afterwards. Aaron, do you think we can negotiate your computer?
Oh.
That's you. Let's see, slideshow. Is that it? No, I'll let you do that part.
Okay.
Up there. All right, here we go. Good luck.
Thank you. Aaron, did you want to wish me good luck as well? Yeah.
Good luck, Josh.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's an honor to be here with you all this week. Again, I'm Josh Travers. I'm the national lead for recreation permits for the Bureau of Land Management. My office is in Grand Junction, Colorado, in BLM's Western headquarters office. It's not a bad place to be. I wanted to start this conversation off by sharing, I've been with the BLM for a long time, and throughout my career, I've witnessed over and over again the tremendous impact that the outfitting and guiding community has had, not just in shaping landscapes, but in transforming people's lives. And I just want to share that the relationship and the collaboration that the outfitting and guiding community has with the BLM is essential. And I just want to share appreciation for your dedication and continued collaboration with the Bureau. I have just a few highlights to share with you today about related to our permitting program. And that's with my commitment to Aaron to keep it short so that you guys have plenty of time to ask questions. So I wanted to kick off the conversation sharing some information on the recent BLM recreation strategy. If you're not familiar with it, it's labeled BLM's Blueprint for 21st Century Outdoor Recreation. This strategy maps out creative ways that the BLM is going to continue to enhance and stabilize recreation programming, continue to protect resources, and ensure that staff have the resources they need to manage the demand of the variety of recreation programs that they provide. The blueprint has four main strategic pillars that it follows. It's grow and diversify resources so that we can meet that demand, continue and prioritize partnerships, such as the partnership that we maintain with the outfitting and guiding community. And then continue to expand outreach into diverse communities and take a balanced approach to how we go about meeting the demand, protecting resources, and improving access to make sure all of those things can come together collectively in a sustainable way. And so when you read this, it's pretty general. You may be asking yourself, what does this mean? How does this impact me? What are the benefits? And that's to come. There's a lot of information, and as we continue to implement this strategic plan, there's going to be a lot more information that we'll be sharing with our communities. So our first step in implementation has been field assessments and state level assessments, where we've gone office by office and have an inventory of their current program, the opportunities that exist, and perhaps challenges that exist for each of the offices. We've taken that information and brought it to the state level, where we've, in 2024, held a variety of state-level summits. We'll continue those summits in 2025, where we're sharing the information that we've inventoried, but collecting external information from local government, public participation, and various stakeholders to also share with the BLM, where external visitors or participants see challenges and opportunities for the BLM. We're going to take all that information and at the state level develop state-specific action plans that will detail how we're going to deploy the recreation strategy in every state. So it likely will look very different in each of our states depending on the variety of programs that they're offering. The BLM is very excited about this opportunity, and we certainly hope that the public is also excited about the strategy that we continue to implement. On a similar note of continuing to enhance our programming, I wanted to talk about Raptor for a second. If you're not familiar with Raptor, it's our recreation and permitting tracking online reporting. For the sake of making it simple, I'm going to stick with Raptor as I continue to discuss it. Raptor is a system that's been built to bring ease to our permitting process for both BLM staff and those seeking an application. We continue to develop Raptor, we're expecting in the near recent future that we're going to deploy more guidance to our field offices that they must start using Raptor. So if it's a system that you're already using, that's great. Continue to familiarize yourself with it. But it's a system that we're going to start bringing all of our permits into this system. And again, it's structured to make you running your business easier and have more control and more transparency of BLM's process of moving applications to issuing a permit. And so what's really important for me, specific to Raptor, is we're at a crucial time where I need feedback from those using Raptor. So if you're using it or you onboard with your local office and start using Raptor, please share feedback on how you think that we could better improve Raptor. We can continue to develop it to support your needs because it's an effort that we're taking and it requires really good feedback for us to prioritize what's really needed to modernize our permitting process. And then the last several slides that I brought is just to provide just a couple updates on key legislation that we continue to track. The first is the minimum wage rule. This last summer, Kurt talked about this a little bit, but the injunction was lifted and BLM's action taken was updating our permit application and the permit form itself. Where we've added into the stipulation, there needs to be compliance with the minimum wage rule. Our applications, I think you guys all know this, can be found on our website on the special recreation permit page. You can obtain updated applications at the local office level. And then Raptor, it's already been updated, and there's no need to. Raptor has the application and permit built into the system. Most importantly, it's important to recognize that the primary agency overseeing the wage rule or any wage law is the Department of Labor, and that's where, if you want to find more information on this rule, I highly recommend that you go to the Department of Labor's website, where they provide a ton of information. The BLM's role is just to ensure compliance with contracts, or in this case, your permits. And then the final legislation that we continue to track is the Explore Act. That act has a lot packed into it, but specific to outfitting and guiding, it's got a lot of language related to permitting. And so we continue to track that. It's gained a tremendous amount of bipartisan support, but until it passes or not, the BLM remains committed to just continuing to work with the recreation community, including outfitting and guiding, to ensure that our permitting practices are as efficient as we can possibly make them. So that's all the updates that I brought. Again, just really appreciate the continued collaboration with the Bureau, and look forward to any questions that you guys have. Thank you.
Thank you, Josh.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I mean, I feel pretty confident. Can I turn that on?
It's fingerprint sensitive.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. It is nice to be here. Ben Johnson, Assistant Director for Recreation, Heritage, and Volunteer Resources with the Forest Service in our DC office. And sadly, I was not here last year, but I think this is my 4th or 5th round with y'all. I had to stay home. My second kid was born last week, a year ago, so some things, trump this. But I'm excited here today to talk to you a little bit about the Recreation Special Uses Program and the Forest Service, and sort of a little bit of recreation in general. And to set some of that context, before I get into my agenda, if you don't already know, the work that y'all do is a really big deal. $1.3 trillion in contributions to the GDP in 2023, 5 million jobs around the country, and 2.3% of our GDP is from the work that y'all do. And those can be like abstract numbers because they are so large, but I think it's good context for the work that y'all do and how we try and support y'all in carrying that work out. And I know that there are stories across the spectrum from horrible to awesome, but that is definitely the intent we have when working with you. So for our agenda today, we want to talk a little bit about Reimagine Recreation, which is similar to our blueprint. It's the Forest Service version. Some of our modernization efforts, policy updates, current events, and questions. And I'm going to keep it relatively quick because I want to make sure we have time for questions and answer. So Reimagine Recreation. I know that my colleagues who were here last year talked a little bit about this. This is an effort we've been undertaking for about since 2022, I guess, to really, for one of the first times in my career, but I think one of the first times for the agency, to actually try and get a cohesive strategy or set of actions around how we manage recreation in the Forest Service, which is a pretty big deal, right? It's 193 million acres across the United States, largest trail system in the world. We have about 7,000 outfitter and guide permits. About half of our campgrounds are managed by concession campground operators. So it's a really big portfolio, and that's not even including ski areas and the impacts that they have. And so really the intent here is to provide that framework. And so over the last 2 years, we've done a lot of work around this, and we've done a lot of engagement internally and even externally. We've had some listening sessions with different partner groups. Hopefully some of y'all were perhaps part of those, to really put this strategy together. We did a soft launch of this internal to the agency in May, and then we decided that we wanted to get a little bit more input from our from tribal entities, tribal groups. And so we have been doing that over the last few months. And so now we're hoping to get this out final. I don't know why I did quotations. It's going to be final. Get this out in winter 2025. So we're doing the fun job of formatting things right now. But we'll get this out for kind of common knowledge in the winter 2025, although that has not stopped us from starting to implement some of the actions. Whoops. And so I won't go through this, but really when we think about Reimagine Recreation, it's trying to provide a framework for our own employees, but also y'all as our partners to organize and support the recreation economy and the recreation industry. And so for us, it really comes down to three key things. That's empowering our workforce, planning for all, so really like community-based recreation planning, and then intentional engagement. And that's really speaks to the way that we show up, both from someone like me in our national office, but also our recreation employees out on districts and supervisors' offices out around the country. So that is more to come. So sorry for year 2 of a teaser, but winter 2025, it'll be final. So next thing is modernization. So I was originally hired into the special uses program under the guise of special uses modernization in 2016. And so that's what we've been pushing along ever since then. And so last year we talked a little bit about this, but the first thing up there is we've established a national billing team. And so historically in the Forest Service, all of your bills, and for outfitters and guides, you're still experiencing this, all of your bills are done at the local level. So you the same person that gives you your permit also does your billing. And so one of the things we're trying to do is to put together a team to slowly take on new permit types to do our billing at more of a corporate level. So in some ways, if you think about like a big, let's say like a cable company, I don't know, well, it's probably a bad example, but the person that installs your cable router for you is not the same person that sends you a bill every month to tell you how much you owe. And so we're trying to be a little bit more efficient and standardized in our billing. And so that's something to be on the lookout for in the next couple of years for outfitting and guiding permits to be taken over by this national billing team. Additionally, we have been working on our internal database. We call it SUDS because we're creative, and this is what we use to manage all of our permits. So there's about 80,000 permits in there, and it's how we do our billing, it's how we do all of our tracking, and that was built in 2004. And I was telling Josh that we realize we need to update it as we hire new employees, and they look at the system and they're like, I don't even know how you interact with this software. So that's something that we're still ongoing. And then finally, much like my colleagues, we are working on online permit application portal. And so for us, we're a few steps behind the BLM and the Park Service, in part because we're including all of our lands uses in this portal. So think like power lines, road easements, et cetera. But we have secured funding through an entity called the Federal Permitting Council to start the development of this online application portal. So it won't be one-stop shop, but it at least is a way to submit your application and have a way to track it as it's going through the process once you start interacting with Forest Service staff. So those are a few of those things. Now, policy. So one of our sort of modernization carryovers is we've really been trying to look at our policies specific to concession campgrounds, recreation events, and outfitting and guiding. And so for the last few years, we've been putting together those policy packages for all 3 of those permit types. And specific to outfitting and guiding, we've really tried to use the last few years of engagements like this, conversations with permit holders, sensing what is in some of the legislation that's out there right now, such as the Explore Act, but even prior iterations of it, to kind of get a feel for what are y'all as a user community clamoring for in terms of outfitting and guiding policy. And then also we did that internal sensing to see what are the roadblocks, how can we make this more efficient for these different things. And so we are now in the phase of pushing those buckets, those batches of policy through department clearance so it can go out for notice and comment, much like what Kurt was referring to. So the first one we think that will go out in probably, March, April. It's hard to say definitively right now because we've got to re-clear everything through the new administration, is our recreation event policy. And so that's for trail runs, festivals, things of that nature. will be the first one to go out. But with that policy, we are also including language around liability waivers and acknowledgement of risk. The agency has historically been pretty silent on the use of those. And so we're trying to make sure that we're not silent anymore and saying how and when to use those. So that's something to watch out for. And then like Kurt was talking around insurance minimums, we are also looking at our liability insurance minimums. Those were updated a long time ago. We know they're out of date. They reference split limit insurance policies, which are a product that doesn't even exist anymore in the insurance industry. And so we were working with a contractor to think about what those new minimums might be. All of which this is all kind of through the policy process for notice and comment. So those are policy updates. Now for some current events. So some of this is cool, some of this sucks. So the first cool thing is the Recreation Residence Fee Retention Program. So this may seem totally left field, but starting in December, we have a certain permit type called recreation residences. These are privately owned cabins, seasonal cabins out on National Forest System lands. And 10 years ago, there was a bill that was passed that said in 10 years, you can keep all that money in the agency as opposed to giving it to the Department of Treasury. Well, it is our 10-year birthday of that bill, and so starting in this new year, we get to keep that money in the agency, which is pretty awesome. It's around $30 million a year, and it can only be used for supporting the Rec Residence program. Those are the folks that passed the bill, so kudos to them. But also to support recreation things in general. And so it's exciting to have a new funding source coming in for local forests to utilize for rec residences, yes, but also hopefully some of that can spill over to the general recreation program once the residences are taken care of. Now I want to talk a little bit about the 2025 field season for the Forest Service. So I imagine everyone here likes to read the news, and so you may be aware that in 2025, a decision was made by the agency that we are going to be very, very limited in hiring seasonal employees this coming field season. This is primarily because of a budget shortfall that we're predicting for a variety of reasons, and that decision was made by the agency. Now, what this could potentially impact you as a permit holder is that some of our staff at the local level, especially district level staff, might have less time this field season to work on certain aspects of permit administration because they're going to help open campgrounds, they're going to help clean toilets, they're going to help do more of that field-based stuff. And so I just want y'all to be aware of this as a community that we partner with, that there could be less availability this field season of your permit administrators because they're being redirected to work on some of the things that our seasonal staff would have taken care of. And so my advice to you, and I know a lot of you do this already, but is really, if you have permit needs, really try and engage with your local staff as soon as possible so that they have more lead time to know that things are coming in. So I'll leave that there. And then finally, recovery from Hurricane Helene. So obviously we're in Chattanooga, nearby, received impacts from Hurricane Helene in Western North Carolina particularly. I have a fondness for that area. I spent 5 seasons working in Brevard, North Carolina. And so just want to first off say that we're trying to be here for you. We're here for y'all, for those who are effective. I hope that you have been engaging with your local National Forest and North Carolina staff and other affected forests. I know that for a while, those forests were in response mode. They were really focusing on their own employees, but also getting an assessment and helping the local communities. They are now transitioning into that recovery mode. And so what they've been doing a lot of is assessments, damage assessments, getting numbers of trails that need to be cleared, wreck sites that need to be fixed. And that's an important part of the puzzle with disaster response because those are the numbers that we as an agency then feed up to be put into what's called a disaster supplemental. And so that's the funding mechanism to respond to disasters that have happened over the previous 6 months or a year. And that disaster supplemental is hopefully going to be attached to the continuing resolution that's being debated in Congress this week and next. And so that's just wanted to highlight the importance of that work that might seem really frustrating in the moment, but that's how we make those financial requests to start the recovery process. I also, for those that are local, I do have a new contact for the person on the National Forest in North Carolina that's been put in charge of recreation recovery specifically. So if y'all want to hit me up, I can share that contact with y'all in Q&A or after things are over. And I did not do a good job of not saying much. So let's go to questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben, Kurt, and Josh. Really appreciate it. You guys did do pretty good. We had a lot of time, probably 20, 25 minutes. And I do know there are some interested parties who have some interesting inquiries in the audience, so try not to reverb here. And happy to field them. So just raise your hand if you have a question for anybody you have up here, and I'll walk the mic back to you. I'll catch this guy, and then I'll catch you. Okay. Steve Hatch.
This one's for Kurt. Thanks for the progress on the waivers versus acknowledgement of risk. That's really appreciated to start moving that course. We know we weren't able to give you specific information on that, what the end result would be by making that transition, because there is no information, but it's a positive move in a good direction, and we appreciate the time on that. And the next one is on the deductibles. Did you say that it was the end of 2025 that we may be able to see some movement on this? Or was that-
Yeah, I think in this coming year, we'll have enough time to kind of research that a little bit more. We've been kind of starting to work at it. We received a letter from Grand Canyon River Rafting Association, America Outdoors, probably about 3 weeks ago or maybe a month ago, and we wanted to engage with our insurance consultants on that. For everybody's sake, a core piece to that was a suggestion to eliminate a deductible amount altogether and allow the insurance companies to set the deductible based on what they felt was a reasonable amount for the company. I'm not sure we'll go that far. To give a little background, particularly for concession contracts, the Park Service has an obligation to make sure that we're putting a contract out on the street for bid that we believe has a reasonable opportunity for profit, which means we have to have an understanding about the financial structure of the contract to include the estimated costs for labor and other expenses, which would include insurance. And not having any deductible means that we have no basis for determining what the cost of the insurance would be. We would have to set something. And so it could be that we set something that says, maybe we increase it from $5,000 to, and don't hold me to any of this because we just started looking at it, to $10,000, so we double it, which would match pretty much the inflationary increase that we saw since we established that initial amount. And then look at maybe a revenue threshold as an alternative to increase that above that. So if you're a company that makes $1 million a year versus $50,000 a year, our concern is essentially that we want to make sure that there's adequate liquidity by the company to cover losses. And so if there was a company that was making $1 million a year, we could assume that, say, if they have a $50,000 deductible, that they probably have a reasonable amount of liquidity to cover that. But if they're only making $50,000, and our concessioners and COA holders run the gambit from, literally husband and wife operations to large corporations. But if they're only making $50,000, the likelihood of being able to cover a $50,000 loss could be much more difficult. And so we have been discussing using revenue as a surrogate for understanding where we could put deductibles. The other piece is that we already have, and will continue to explore, the ability to set a minimum, but then allow you to find alternative ways to raise that deductible and have a self-insured retention. So, for example, if we set it at 10 million and you wanted to go, or 10,000, and you wanted to go to, say, $1 million, you would find a way to finance or have available or demonstrate availability of that difference. That could be through, for example, a surety bond or some other, a line of credit or something that you could provide to the Park Service to demonstrate that if there was a loss, you could cover that difference. So we're trying to explore all of those alternatives as means to meet the requirement that we have to assure that there's insurance there, but also provide more flexibility and ability for you to potentially raise deductibles and therefore have less expensive insurance.
Can I follow up on that?
Mm-hmm.
I don't follow the logic with that at all. And the reason is that when you look at possibly higher deductibles, that's a business arrangement between the insurance industry and the concessionaire. They see our financials, they understand our financials, and they know that they will be paid, and it really isn't having any effect on the guest or the...
Well, our concern over the guest experience is that if there's a loss and you don't have the liquidity to actually pay off the loss, there's a problem. You either have to bankrupt the company or find that money somehow. And so we've institutionally been very concerned about making sure that the visitor is protected in case of a loss, and that's our interest. We're also interested in making sure, because it's very complex, as you know, Steve, the process of getting a concession contract out is a multi-year process. We have a vested interest in making sure the business has the capacity to stay in business. And so if the deductible is really high, there's a large loss, it could potentially suck all the money out of the business and the business would go under. And so we have discussed with our consultant, we just started this conversation, but I'm not sure that the insurance company necessarily has the interest of the visitor in mind. I think they have an interest in maximizing their profit. Some of that is associated with their lack of interest in having lower deductibles, because then they're paying out on small claims that they don't really like. They'd rather have a higher deductible amount. The insurance companies are more well-versed than me, but they'll explain how that's a better business arrangement for them because they don't have to pay out as much. And so their interest is in essentially, where do they feel a deductible amount is that gives them their least risk, not necessarily the risk of the visitor. So happy to have more conversations about that. I know there's probably other questions, but I think it's going to be an ongoing dialogue that we're probably not done having yet. And we're just kind of getting into what this might look like. So.
Yeah, the case in point that I would make is that the front-end cost of the insurance policy without changing the deductible is more than the deductible itself. So basically the point is that you're taking more money from the outfitter to say that they're covered and they can sustain and be viable than what the actual deductible increase would be. Case in point, we have one of our Grand Canyon outfitters who currently has a $500,000 expense ratio right now, and if they could get their deductible to $100,000, they would have already saved in this renewal period $175,000. So I'm not getting the logic on this when I have grounded this with the insurance industry, and we're currently working with insurance experts right now to fine-tune the underwriting to help with those policies so that the underwriters can have a better understanding of what it is we do, so that we can help get some costs down. But this defies logic to me, Kurt. I don't understand it. If the front-end cost, because of the lack of a change in deductible, is more than what the deductible could be raised to, you're doing harm to the outfitter. You're not trying to keep them in business at that point.
Yeah, I appreciate your comments. And my suggestion, one of the things that we lack fundamentally is information from the community. So I know the letter that we received had a couple reference points that said if we raise the deductible to $10,000, we'd have a savings of, I'm not quoting it perfectly, 10%. If it was $30,000, it'd be 30%. 50,000 would be something else. But we've never really seen any detail around any of that. We've been asking for it for years on a whole host of topics. But I know that I think America Outdoors is working on some survey information that may be helpful to us. But ultimately, we have to answer to a stakeholder, which is the general public. And so having good data to support what you just said is important. And without having that information, we're kind of working blindly, and we're, take our word for it. It's really expensive, and we'll be making enough money out of this to make it worthwhile. So, if you have specific data on that, we'd like to see it.
We submitted that, Kurt.
You said that a lot, and we have submitted what we've got. The insurance industry has.
I have a letter from America Outdoors. I'm not sure I have too much more. Maybe I'm missing
That
it.
letter nails it down exactly to the cost savings, and you apply that through our annual financial review, which you have access to. You can see the numbers plainly in those expenses. And
Yeah, well, I mean, I appreciate this, and I don't want to monopolize a conversation around Park Service insurance. So I'm happy to have a conversation afterwards and share where we are on this. But I mean, I think we're just starting to work on this. So an expectation that I have an answer 3 weeks after getting a letter is unreasonable. So.
Well, we talked about it in January with you and Justin as well. We've been talking about this for a long time. And
Yeah.
the information that you've requested is difficult to, I don't know the details that you're looking for that we can provide when we're trying to explain the ratio of the income savings and the deductible.
Well, we can have more conversations about it. I appreciate that.
Well, your comment that it will take until the end of next year is terrifying. That's not okay, and we really need, like, this is our number one thing. You know that from Grand Canyon's perspective anyways, but you just explained it very well about what you might consider, and not to quote you. The end of 2025? It's gonna take that long to get to an answer of that?
Well, if we're completely revamping an insurance program, by the time we get through solicitor review and we have a new administration coming in, which needs to be vetted to, this is not a decision point that I can make individually, nor my boss, Justin Unger, likely. It's probably going to go to the director. We can have a new director in, 60 days or less, and it's going to take them time to get oriented and actually take that sort of stuff on. So when I said 2025, I was speaking generally. It may be sooner than that. It may be that we raise a deductible a small amount, but I don't think we're going to be eliminating deductibles altogether. I don't think that's a place where we can go, but we may be raising it. Where we go with that, again, it may be revenue-based. Maybe that's acceptable to you, maybe not. We're also talking about finding ways to create a self-insured retention, which will allow you to increase your deductible amount and still meet your contractual obligation. And that may be an option, which is, getting a line of credit for that difference would be fairly straightforward. So you'd be taking the money home into the bank and then just paying for the line of credit. So that sounds like a reasonable option. So I think we are talking about doing what you're asking. It's just you got to give us a little time to absorb that and understand it. The waiver of liability stuff I started working on a year ago. We haven't gotten it out of the director's office yet. So
I'd love to add a little color to that, if I may.
I was just going to ask you, can you give us information on your new consultant? Did you not terminate the last consultant? You had a new one on board?
So the Park Service and the federal government issues contracts. They're for periods of time. The contract period for our last consultant was 5 years. The consultant before that was for 5 years. We're required by policy that we have to issue contracts to small businesses. Many of you are small businesses. You should probably appreciate that. Small businesses compete just like you all compete. The best offer wins the contract. Our current contract is not the last one. We had MFL Aon. It was our first consultant that we were using for 15 years ago. Second was Northport. Northport's service ended at the end of the contract, which was just a few weeks ago. The new consultant is Road Technologies, or Road something. They've been on for approximately 3 weeks. So in addition to all of the other pieces is bringing a new consultant on, which is complicated for us, but it's the way the world works in contracting for federal government. So we have a lack of continuity. We have to get them up to speed, bring them in, explain, the breadth of services that include not only yours, but the front country operations and all the property insurance requirements that are similarly stressed at this point in time. So, so that takes us a little while too. Yeah. But it's Road Strategies, I think, is the name of the company.
So my name is Ruthie Rivers with Granite Insurance Agency. So I focus in the whitewater rafting industry, and I've been working with some of these folks on some of those arguments and helping draft that letter and add color to it. I think the biggest thing I'm hearing from you is just a need for additional information, and I think that you've got resources in this room and at this conference so we can help with that. I think that one thing that we can provide to you that it doesn't sound like you might have yet are examples of how different deductibles or self-insured retention situations would play out. I think a massive understanding or misunderstanding is that when you have a deductible, if you cannot pay the deductible to the carrier, then the carrier is not going to pay out the claim, and that's not how that would shake out. The carrier would pay out the claim to the injured participant, and then they look to get reimbursed by the outfitter for that deductible. So if the outfitter is unable to provide that deductible back to the carrier, then that's the carrier's responsibility to follow up and figure that out and get reimbursed after everything. So it's not going to affect the injured participant or their family. And when we are talking about just financial stability of an outfitter, that is very important to a carrier. They want to make sure that before they are insuring an outfitter, that outfitter is going to be able to pay out for that claim, because again, it's their responsibility to get that as a reimbursement from the outfitter after an accident has occurred. So they are looking at it from that perspective. They are looking at the income statement, balance sheet, all of that kind of stuff to make sure that they feel comfortable with whatever deductible they're allowing that outfitter. And then beyond the ability to pay a deductible, they also want to make sure that they're not just able to pay that deductible and it's like a thin margin, right? They want to make sure that outfitter has enough financial backing to invest into critical risk management and training and equipment and all of that kind of stuff. So I think there is a little bit of duplication of effort there. The insurance carrier does have skin in the game, and I think that we can continue the conversation and get you as much information as you need on how those different scenarios would play out. I and the other insurance representatives here at the conference, I can speak for all of us, I feel like, are ready to provide any information needed to make that happen.
Thanks, appreciate it. I was going to go something more like, there are two really cool names, one Raptor and one Suds, and I would like to pose a contest for a good name for the concessions system, but this is a much more interesting conversation.
I'll get to you, Don. We got a question right here.
Beer's not going to get the job done.
Thank you. Hey, I'm Christy Thrift. I own NC Outdoor Adventures. We are in Ground Zero of Helene. We are sandwiched on the Tow River, which is the headwaters for the Nolichucky. We're like 8 miles above the Nolichucky Gorge and 5 miles below the Tow Gorge. And of course, I'm sure you're aware, American Whitewater sued CSX and some other organizations for further destroying. Of course, the rivers were astronomically ripped to pieces by the storm itself. But now those problems are being further compounded by mining of cobble and stone, and things are going on in the river that CSX hurriedly came in and did. They've admitted fault. They issued the cease and desist on Friday. That went into place on Saturday. They were no longer supposed to be with heavy equipment in the river. They were no longer supposed to be mining out the cobblestone. We hiked in to check the Tow Gorge on Sunday. They were down in the river. As soon as they saw me filming, they got their equipment and went to the other part of the river. We've got railroad ties that have been cut off from the railroad that were still hanging, but now they're just cut off and pushed in, and they built roads in our rivers to get to the railroad tracks. They literally scooped up all the rocks that made the rapids to build the road bed. And for example, I don't know how many people have rafted the Nolichucky, but quarter mile is gone. All of that stuff is been further destroyed and actually removed from our rivers to build the railroad. They are not bringing in outside materials. They've started to, but I would like to know, our state officials and our county officials don't give a crap. I mean, it's very obvious. They just don't care about that, especially on the North Carolina side. They just really don't care. And we really need some help from way higher up to get this fixed, because obviously those cease and desist went into play. It didn't mean anything. They were out there working Sunday. They don't care about the fine. It's a slap on the wrist. I'm sure it's a drop in the bucket to CSX's $36 million. So I want to know, how can you guys help us? Because we are already forced with facing the fact that we may not be able to open at all on the Noli, on the French Broad, on the Tow, parts of the Pigeon. We're already faced with the fact that our major source of income is probably not going to work this year. Not only do we have the CSX destroying the river further, but we also don't have any testing being done on a state level that are being released of the heavy metals and crap that is in that river. It shouldn't be up to nonprofits to test the health of the waterway and the soil samples. It should be up to the state and federal levels and those health departments to be doing that. They're not doing that either. So we're kind of getting smacked all the way around. We dealt with this huge trauma. We're still recovering. Like my neighbor's still missing. His house floated away with him the minute we watched it. So we're already suffering a trauma, and now we're having to navigate this, 1,000-year flood with a huge corporation that's literally mining out our rivers, and I don't know where else to reach. American Whitewater's done a great job. They got the cease and desist, but it really doesn't mean anything to them. They're still continuing to work that way. So I want to know how you guys can help us with this sooner rather than later, because if we don't do something soon, it's not going to be there. I mean, like the tow gorge is completely non-navigable now.
Yeah, Christy, I appreciate you sharing that story with us, right? That real lived experience that you had even as recent as Sunday. I'm not intimately familiar with what CSX is doing to rebuild that railroad line or that trestle. But what I can offer you is a local contact with the Forest Service at the very least to put you in touch with someone that's local, working on the National Forest in North Carolina, and might be able to help with some coordination in turn.
So they actually sued not just CSX, but they sued the Forest Service and Mission Game because they were supposed to be mediating what the work they did. And I think, again, it goes back to everybody was in recovery mode, right? They didn't have time to get out there and see what CSX was doing. I mean, I haven't even made it much out of my town.
Right.
So I get that. I may not be neglect or we don't care. It just maybe we don't have the resources. So I feel like if I contact that North Carolina guy, he's going to be as overwhelmed as everybody else, and we're just not going to get anywhere.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
I'll try, and I appreciate it.
well, and also, like, I have lots of business cards. Anyone can have them, but particularly for you, like, shoot me an email because I can connect you with Shane. There's also the regional office that I can help you facilitate a conversation with. I don't know what it might lead to, but it's at least somewhere we can start.
Right?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Is Shane the person overseeing the recreation recovery aspects of the Forest Service work?
Yeah, so Shane Fires, and
Spell that last name, please.
F as in Frank, E as in excellent, Y as in yeehaw, E as in excellent, R as in Robert, and S as in Sally. Yeah, so I think, and I'm speaking for Shane, who I've met once about 7 months ago, so grain of salt. But I believe he just started as an assignment working specifically on recreation recovery for the National Forest in North Carolina.
Do they have that supervisor's office open yet? Because I know at last I tried to reach out to Supervisor Malone and it was still down.
I am not sure. I don't know, Steve, if you know if the office is open.
I've got communication with James.
Let me get his contact.
Yeah, have you not heard from your district manager or from James directly?
I was going to deal with the regional office.
Okay.
Yeah, I would definitely recommend trying to break into a conversation with either the district ranger or James, who's the forest supervisor, for folks who don't know, because they're going to be closest to the ground. Region's going to be supporting those district rangers and forest supervisors, but the real decision-making is going to be happening with those folks.
Question for Don Packman.
My first question's for Kurt. You may remember we were on a conference calls together about 7-8 years ago when insurance requirement recommendations were made. And at that time, close to the resolution, you had sent out a matrix to the National Park Service district offices or regional offices with the recommended limits from your office for various exposures or types of for each activity. And this year, we had several clients who had CUAs in Olympic National Park where they increased the limit to in excess of $1 million per occurrence. I did write a strongly worded email to the permit administrator that ended up with the permit office chief administrator, and he agreed to revert to the $1 million per occurrence limit this year. For this year, I had questioned whether he had measured the impacts on the guiding community that were applying for these CUAs, and that was the reason he agreed to do it. My question is, how much leeway do these regional or local offices have in setting general liability limits? He claimed that due to increased cost of evacuation in that particular park, he felt there a need to increase the required insurance limits.
Yeah, I don't have specifics, so I would, it'd be good to talk afterwards about those specifics, because I don't want to speak for exactly what this individual did or didn't do. Generally, through, to be honest with you, a negotiated process with many of the room who spoke earlier to me. That table was a genesis out of a lot of work with our insurance consultants, where actually the numbers were quite higher than that, and we ultimately negotiated down to what everybody felt was a pretty reasonable amount. Those still are in place, and those have not been updated, and those are the guidelines that are supposed to be used by regions when they issue concession contracts and parks when they issue CUAs. So I can't speak to the specifics as to why there may have been a need. The regional director ultimately has the ability to waive those and take additional action if there's some specific need for doing that, both increasing or decreasing. But it's a very unusual circumstance, so it'd be good to just hear a little bit more about the particulars and find out if there's a specific reason as to why that might have been taken on that way.
Okay. Do they need your authorization to do that?
Not specifically, no. The authorization for making those sorts of changes is delegated downward to the regional director. So
I have a second question, and that is, how will you be announcing or promulgating or disseminating the change on the waiver forms and the prohibition on indemnification and waiver?
Good question. We would probably, we would do that through multiple channels. So one is we would be giving Aaron a heads up, as well as the National Park Hospitality Association. Both organizations support concessions and CUA activities. The second is we would be putting it up on our concession and CUA external website as a news item. And the third is we'd be passing that information out to all the park units, so that the park units would also have that as a policy change. And then it would also go up on our website as a policy, because this will be issued probably as a policy memorandum for change.
Do you have any sense of how long that process will take before the users can implement the change?
This should be something that is kind of instantaneously, as soon as the policy is out, can be implemented, because essentially be saying, as of right now, you have the authority to use a waiver of liability. And like I said, without being able to commit to exactly when something happens, because I don't have control over the director's schedule, that policy memorandum has gone through 2 reviews of solicitor review. I'm hoping to get the last one out when I get back in my office on Friday, and then it would go to the director's office for signature. So, hopefully, before the end of the month, we would have that policy document out.
Thank you, Kurt. I have one more quick question for both Kurt and Ben. Quick, very quick. And that is there any connection between the new, I know you won't like this question, but any connection or ownership between the consultants you're using and insurance providers, like the Aon, where they were also a major provider of river rafters insurance?
Yeah, so Road Strategies, as far as I know, doesn't place insurance. They're not a broker. It's a relatively small firm. With Aon, we were actually using MFL, which is a small company, and they were using Aon for support, but there was a firewall between those, so they weren't supposed to be doing any brokering work directly. I know that had come up at the time as a potential conflict, but it is also challenging for us because we're trying to understand what the cost of insurance is, and without placing the insurance, ourselves, even as a kind of on a surrogate or a test phase, it's difficult for us to understand that exactly. So there's a bit of a difficulty there that we struggle with because we want to know what the cost of insurance is as we're doing a prospectus. That was helpful in Aon's case as a result of that. I don't think there was any, suggestion that Aon was somehow cooking the insurance, the premium costs as a result of their being able to do it. I don't believe that Rhodes has that conflict at all.
Thank you. Dan, is it?
Yeah, honestly, I'm not sure if I know the answer to that question, so I might have to, if there's some way I can follow up with you, I can ask and do that. I do know sort of anecdotally that our minimums are so low that I feel like most of y'all probably already pay for things much above them, is a lot of the feedback I've received, but I'll leave it there. But yeah, let's talk.
Just a quick couple comments. First of all, Josh, I want to acknowledge that I really appreciate that you led off your whole presentation kind of acknowledging the work that we're doing. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, so veto if I'm saying this wrongly, but kind of an extension of some of your mission statements that we're out in the field, especially those of us who are guides, and that we're out there helping send those messages that I think are core to the agencies and providing service to the resource as well. And I think, Christy, your point about just that you're out there, not only do you have a personal interest because you run a business, but obviously you care about that resource more than most anybody could or would. And so I lead that off because I feel like the keynote this morning, I loved what she had to say about the importance of guides and providing that, for many people, their first opportunity out there. And I'm based in the Pacific Northwest, and we've got some amazing national parks. We've got amazing national forest land. BLM is a little bit more on the east side of our states, and it's just incredible, great resources. And I'm feeling, with my business, is very hamstrung to be able to provide those opportunities for people because there's very limited access to Forest Service is probably the most restrictive where I live. And I want to provide those first opportunities for people. Get off the plane. They could rent a car, drive out there and just go on a hike. But if they choose to go with a guide, all of a sudden they're somehow doing more harm to the land according to the regulatory aspect to it. So I just want to maybe, Ben, pick on you since you've been picked on a lot, Kurt. I've got things to say to you, but I'm going to let it go. Ben, I want to pick on you, but first acknowledge thank you for being here because that's why this conference is so valuable to me. That's why I'm a first-time attendee, is because you're here, and I really appreciate that, and you're all here too. So Ben, if you can just acknowledge, what are some ways that companies like mine that are not a specific, like a river resource, we're a hiking company. We want to go hike where the people want to hike and where the nature is, and we want to do our part to live up to the leave no trace and teach those principles. Are there things that we can expect down the line that where maybe that old system of there are 5 permits, 10 people can go here and one, where that's just maybe out of date and not currently what our industry is about? Are there things we can expect from Forest Service that might open up some of that so we can do our job to support you?
Yeah, appreciate the question. And I live in Bellingham, so I've probably been to the same crowded trailheads that you're facing. This is like a kind of a time-honored question, if that's the right phrase, to come to the Forest Service. And one thing that we're trying to crack the nugget on, but every time we hit that nugget, it gets harder and denser. And so we're trying to think of new ways to go about it. And so one of the things that we used to say a lot of times, and still is totally valid, is first, it's like getting that relationship with the local staff. And I don't know if you've had success with that or not, whether you're going to, Snoqualmie or up to Cedar Woolley and trying to have a conversation with the local district ranger of the area that you're wanting to go take people to, because they can help refine your proposal, right? Like if they just get an email in that says, I want to take 15 people here every Saturday, that's going to elicit a certain type of reaction versus trying to figure out where the hot spots are around, the west side of the Cascades and what might work. Another one would be something we've talked about in prior sessions, but nominal effects determinations are a tool that actually the Mount Baker Snoqualmie National Forest in your area has used in the past. And so this is basically the local line officer saying that the impact of this proposed use is so nominal that like I don't even need a permit. That can lead to complications for the proprietor, because that means we don't require insurance, we don't any of that sort of like standard duty of care stuff that's in a permit. But that's something to think about as well. And then I like to think that like the policy updates that I alluded to around outfitting and guiding will help in some ways increase efficiency around getting from zero to a permit in your hand. But I also will say there are some areas around the country, the Northwest being one of them, that there are just a lot of people out on the resource. And I know that that's too blankety of a statement, because
Those people can go whether they're choosing to go with a guide or, I mean, that's the people that are getting hurt are the people like the keynote this morning who would like to go with a guide, chooses not to go to the outdoors because there, maybe there isn't a guide service available. So I just would like, I guess my question was, can we flip the script and be less of, hey, we're helping you outfitters out so you can run a business, and more, hey, we're helping you agency out so we can get folks out into nature who it's their land, it's their public land.
Yeah.
And if they're not going because they don't feel safe or comfortable, or they just don't have the resources from the gear perspective, so that's all I'm asking is like, can we flip the script and be less about you helping us and more about we helping you to serve your people?
Yeah, no, you're preaching to the choir of Ben over here. So I agree with you, but that in a certain degree, that is not a policy change. That is a cultural change in how the nation thinks of recreation and visitor use on public lands. And so that's a little bit larger conversation that like we all need to engage in, because it's all of our future is figuring out how to deal with more people wanting to go outside. Like that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to get people to go outside. That's what we run our businesses off of. But we just all need to be conscious of like, where is that ship sailing, and is it sailing where we all collectively want it to be? And I think that's that cultural thing that I'm totally in your camp, but
Carpooling.
yeah,
Less parking spaces.
Exactly. Yeah.
Helping.
Yep.
Thank you, sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sure we all have those bugs.
We have a couple more questions in the audience that I'm aware of. There may be more questions that I'm not. We have, like it is after 5 o'clock now, so we've sort of been rolling more than 15 minutes over the allotted time. If our panelists are willing to take a couple more questions, I'm happy to keep fielding these. Folks shouldn't feel obligated to stay if you're this coalition of the willing, let's say, who want to stay in here, but the River Radius podcast is kicking off pretty soon to tell some of these stories from Hurricane Helene. So yeah, if you want to take off, please feel free, but we'll keep this going for as long as everybody's willing and able.
Hello, Michael Cohen, Santa Barbara Adventure Company. Kurt, thank you so much for coming, all of the speakers. I think it's really important for me to highlight that we are building a strong community here in this outfitting organization with the furtherance of the goal of really trying to get people outside. And you are also saying that you want to do the same thing with your mandates. As the first speaker, or the Forest Service person spoke, BLM, we are a $1.2 trillion industry. The demand is huge. So Kurt, I'm curious about on the CUA process, you had talked about the continuing resolution and the review that was going to be happening into the future here. Could you just briefly run through that again?
So I had referenced the fact that we were doing a regulatory action. So we had a statute, the 1998 Concessions Management Improvement Act, which authorized commercial use authorizations, and it dictated that statutorily we were responsible for issuing regulations to implement that statute. We did that for the concessions rule. We deferred on commercial use authorizations, and we created policy to implement CUAs to address, application fees and management fees, et cetera, which are resident in a thing called a commercial services guide, which is basically not regulation, but our internal policies. But we still had that obligation to issue a regulation. So we started to take that on this last year. We got enough bandwidth. We had worked through the concessions regulation update. We felt it was time to do that. We initiated that process. We wrote a draft regulation. The process for a regulation is typically that the regulation is drafted. It has to go through a review, an economic analysis process with the Office of Management and Budget, where we provide information to them on, here's the proposed rule, what do we think the economic impacts to the businesses, to visitors, socio, et cetera, will do. Everybody kind of agrees to that. And when we put that out as a draft rule, the draft comments come back, we review those comments, we revise the rule based on those comments as we believe is appropriate, and then we issue the final rulemaking. This year, when we went through the process of we issued the draft CUA rule. We went to the Office of Management and Budget, and this is really wonky stuff. We had to determine what a baseline that we were going to do our economic analysis against, and we had a disagreement with OMB on it. It's too complicated to even go into. But essentially, we said, okay, what you're asking us to do is going to cost us $500,000, and we need to get a contractor in place, and we can't do that in the short term before there's an administration change. It doesn't make sense for us to get this bottled up. And almost every administration, when the rulemaking process, when a new administration comes in, they kind of kill all the existing regulations, wait to kind of re-up them. And so we just didn't want to get into that. So we're going to restart that as soon as the new administration is in and kind of get settled, walk over to OMB and have deeper conversations about what they want us to do on this economic analysis, and then move that all out. So sometime later this year, we'll have a draft rule that will be out on the street for public comment. Okay. We will certainly work with America Outdoors and others to make sure that folks are aware of it, in addition to be published in the Federal Register.
Thank you. I'm concerned. My challenge, and the reason I bring this up, is at my Channel Islands National Park on the CUA permits. I'm seeing a broad authority that's happening at the superintendent local level that's really creating caps. And although we have appealed, I feel like there's resistance from that local superintendent. I really would like to use data and appeal to regional. The reason why is a creation of a CUA that is just come into existence on outdoor education programs. And the caps that they pulled up on us were, in a sense, too restrictive, and they were able to pull down data from their use capacities to support that. But we're seeing still, because it's an island operation, a lot of no-shows or a lot of people who can't get to the park, very similar to some of the other topics that we had listed here today, where the people, it's held in a way for the public to come and use that space, yet we have the demand from the public to us. And we are capped in our ability to take more commercial school groups out. The saddest part of this is that it tends to affect the lowest income level client. If you only have 12 permits, you end up holding those for return clients or people who can pay the fees to do a more expensive trip. And so then when we had been able, with a more broad CUA allowance, to handle a lot of lower income groups, then we were able to service these same demographics that we've been talking about all these years in diversity, in underprivileged or underserved communities. So it's a backlash from a cap. So my question for you is, how do I appeal caps on a CUA? And how would that, in this resolution that's coming out, obviously I'd be happy to comment in the public comment period. And I wondered if it's going to address these caps or usage limits on permits.
I think the answer is yes, it will. Our existing policy discusses the idea of creating, typically commercial use authorizations are unlimited unless there's visitor impacts based on study and carrying capacity, in which case there's a limiting process that happens, and that limiting process then often creates a competitive CUA process as well. So I can't speak specifically to Channel Islands. I know Ethan McKinley very well. and exactly what the issue is in regards to carrying capacity and the need to set limits on the number of CUAs. But I think it kind of gets to Ben's question of, this interest in us making sure that we're providing maximum opportunity for visitors, particularly as visitors shift from independence to wanting guided activities, and then balancing both with a continued increase of direct independent visitors. So we've got this kind of push for people, and then we have the carrying capacity of the resource and making sure that, in our particular case, it's preserved, conserved, and protected for future generations, which is our fundamental statutory authority. And so there's that tension point. And that tension point for CUAs is currently managed at the park level by the superintendent. For concession contracts, it's elevated higher, and that's managed at the regional and Washington level, but there should be documentation. You asked kind of what should you do. I think my recommendation is, you've probably already talked to Ethan, but if you're really interested, you could ask the question of the regional director and pose that question. We're interested in understanding a little bit more about this, and we feel we have ways to kind of manage that balance point.
I also wanted to take a minute and thank you all for coming. I've said this every time I've spoken every year. We put you in the hot seat. We get these wonderful orators to come up here and do some speeches at you. We just really appreciate you coming. So please keep coming back. This partnership is valuable. To hear you, to see you all, and to get to know you, it's going to help us. I think we're all expressing the same thing, that there's these barriers to actually getting what people, our clients, want. And so thank you for helping us to work through those, listening to us, and we will in turn listen to you. Because I think you have an incredible group of talented outfitters that really are on the same goals and values of what you're saying, and that we're really just this conflict on policy. So I appreciate the input.
Yeah, well, I think I could speak for all of us. This is a great opportunity for us. We wish there was more of this. And we do appreciate when folks come to town and we get a chance to talk in smaller groups to discuss specific issues as well. So please, my door is always open. I'm happy to have folks come. We're from Washington and we really are here to help. So.
That's right.
Well, he's from Washington in quotations, has been suggested. So.
Hey guys, Stephen Foy with NOC. Again, thanks for y'all for being here. I'll echo that statement. I'll switch gears a little bit. Maybe it's a statement, maybe it's a comment, maybe it's just curiosity. I don't have like a pointed question, and I certainly don't want y'all like making a statement on record about it, but I'm really curious about the agency's perspective on the minimum wage. I know it's an executive order. They don't have authority over it. The Department of Labor enforces it, right? But somehow it's the one non-operating law that is written into our permits. None of the Department of Transportation regulations are written into our permits. It's the one executive order that somehow is in there that y'all also then don't regulate, which is kind of interesting. And for us, it's kind of been just this ping pong battle, right? Administration change, some injunction, some wiggle room, a date changes or whatever. It's this constant thing that, at least for those of us in the East, where state wages are much lower than they are in the West, where we are, our environment in the East, it's not just a Park Service or a Forest Service. We're butted up against a state permit, a county permit, and then other attractions. So our competition is not just the other concessionaire in the park or the other CUA in the park. Our competition is much greater than that. So the wage thing gets really complex very quickly. And I'm just kind of curious what the conversations are like within the agency. I mean, Kurt, you said, what's that, 60 million in fees from concession and 4 million in fees from CUA. Is that substantial revenue for your agency, I'm supposing? Ben, you said 7,000 permit holders. Our district, we have more recreation permit than any other district in the country, right? So I feel like the impact to you guys is just as real as it is to us. Kurt, at one of our CUAs and our concessions in Atlanta, the increase in pricing was going to be well over 25%. And we're already priced at least 30% ahead of other regional Park Service, similar businesses. We're already priced ahead. So going up on price to account for it, we're kind of at a ceiling. I know that's out of your control, but that's just for context. Ben, one of our key capstone experiences, there's only 3 outfitters, and one of them just left. But we looked at likely a 30 to 40% decrease in visitation. Our first thing that we assumed that we were going to do was going to be cutting all of our low price point based youth programs and then all of our discounted guests, right? The most price sensitive, we assumed they wouldn't come. Those are folks I think everybody want to be sharing the natural resources with. So I think it's definitely a hit to our business. It's a hit to our heart of the business. It's a hit to y'all's revenue. And I'm just curious about, what's kind of y'all's chatter been like within the agency? I'm not looking for an official statement. I know y'all don't have any influence against the White House or the Department of Labor. I'm just kind of curious what y'all's perspective on this thing has been, because Lord knows what's going to happen in the next month and a half, right? The last time President Trump took over, he wiped out the last executive order, and then we continue to ping pong. And whether it's 4 years, 8 years, 12 years, whatever, I suspect this thing is still going to hit us at some point. We're working within our districts to try to get caught up, but even in North Carolina, our minimum state wage is $7.25 still. We've been beyond that as a company for years, but the other folks that we compete against in the region for attractions are still paying $7.25, including state and county permits, right? The other things that are around us. So it makes it really difficult for us to compete beyond just that. I know I've said that twice. So say as much as you'd like or say no comment, that's fine, but that's my question.
I don't think.
Good luck.
Good luck.
I think certainly as a federal bureaucrat, our interest is making sure that there's a living wage for employees that are operated. So I'm not going to go much further than that on the federal minimum wage in essence. I will mention that for concession contracts, we take into account, back to the insurance included, as well as labor, what we estimate the labor costs are going to be for the business. And ultimately, a decision for higher labor costs means that it gives in 2 ways. One of them is rates go up. The other one is we take a lower franchise fee. And so in the Park Service, for concession contracts, we find ourselves taking a lower franchise fee because we already want to make sure that rates are reasonable and appropriate. So that's less money coming back from the Park Service, but we recognize that as a federal executive initiative, and that's the position that we've been asked to take. So that's kind of when it ping-pongs, we set an expectation for wages, and then the federal minimum wage goes away or is enjoined. We then leave money on the table. We're not getting what we believe to be a reasonable return to the government, and so it's a windfall for the concessioner. We would prefer stability one way or the other. And so however the federal executive wants to take that, we would like to get them to a place where there's a steadiness to that. I do know on so many things, the idea is that the power of the federal government in moving markets, will move all ships rise. And so the idea is, I think if the federal government is doing it, you would attract workers, or employees, and then others wouldn't be able to, and therefore they would raise theirs, and ultimately this would be a benefit to society. How that works, and I won't, I'm not an economist, so I started out as a clam farmer, so I can't answer that question.
Clam farmer.
I don't know if anybody else wants to take that.
Yeah, I'll just add, your one specific question about why is this in my permit when there are plenty of labor laws out there that we all have to abide by in our lives. But my recollection is that the way that when DOL promulgated their rule enforcing the executive order, they specifically called out and directed agencies to put it into all the different mechanisms that were covered by that EO. And so that's why that one is that specific. Yeah.
So I guess a caveat, another question on top of this is something that we've talked about, and again, I have no idea if the agencies have talked about it, is that we believe that the fundamental structure of our federal permits is different than every other federal permit that likely this was originally designed for. We're not a procurement contract, right? we're not receiving any money from the government. We're not building a road, we're not rebuilding anything of a, do you want me to take some of this? All right, so the question is that our concession contracts and our Forest Service contracts are structurally very different than most other federal contracts. We're not a procurement contract, right? So we don't bid for a service that we're going to provide and then the federal government pay us. We pay a percentage of our revenues back to y'all, right? Very structurally different. And so I'm just curious if there's a way that the agencies have looked at that as to say, hey, Department of Labor, when these guys write y'all comments, like, they're not lying to you. Take them seriously. Like this, because it affects y'all's revenue, it affects y'all's visitation as much as it does ours. So I'm just curious if that's something y'all discussed.
I think the short answer is not really. I think you are correct in that when DOL looks at, concession contracts and the permits that we do as a % of the contracting that the federal government does, I can't remember what the number was, like $180 billion of contracting my boss in the Park Service did. So this environment pales. And so when DOL is looking at that, they are really looking at the larger federal sector, and that approach is different, where we're charging, as you suggested, it's not a fee for, the fee structure is different, and so it affects the contracts differently. I think your comments have probably been heard by DOL. We understand them. We've had conversations with DOL on a host of issues to get them to better understand the types of contracts that we operate and permits that we operate, because there is this broad brush that's often painted, and there needs to be some specificity on how unique those are. Now, I think in the broader context that doesn't always result in anything,
What did they say to that?
To be honest with you, I think there's head nodding, and yes, we understand what you're saying. But so we've educated, but again, our position is we work at the pleasure of the President of the United States, and if that's what the President is asking us to do, we'll provide insight onto whether this is good. We think this is good or bad policy as they're making it, but ultimately we do what we're asked to do.
I realize that y'all can't advocate for us, that y'all can't speak for us with the government, that y'all can't. I recognize the position you're all in, that even though we use that term partnership, this is the kind of thing that y'all can't go to the White House and say, change this. It's not y'all's position. I recognize that.
That is correct, but
Yes.
but we are business partners, and so
Correct.
we do. I think it would. I don't think it's correct to say that we don't advocate.
Okay.
We educate, and as part of that education, it's an attempt to advocate to get the larger federal systems to understand the types of contracts and the types of relationships, the activities that are going on, the complexities that exist, so that so there's a broader, fully informed decision-making process on policy, regulation, et cetera.
That's great to know. It's great. I didn't know that y'all were engaged in that education. Thank you for that. Because that's the kind of thing where I think that this partnership that we do have would be great, because nobody in here, we're actively trying to pay a living wage, but a living wage for a seasonal guide living in staff housing is a very different thing than a full-time year-round individual operating heavy machinery, right? Two totally different things. And you guys understand that. Seemingly the Department of Labor either does or does not understand it, depending on which side of the document they want to read, So to the extent that it feels like y'all are vested partners in the outcome of this, the more y'all can educate and help us be partners in what that communication looks like, we're really appreciative.
Thank you for not enforcing it.
I should clarify on enforcement. We don't enforce. If there's a labor issue that is brought forward to the superintendent of a park, as a concession employee has a complaint, we have an obligation to refer that to the Department of Labor to manage. So we don't get involved in it. We may be asked to provide information that we have, but we don't adjudicate that. We're not responsible for it. Thank goodness.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. It would be, compliance is hard enough, and I can imagine enforcement of compliance is even more complicated. We do have a couple more questions. Point of clarification, it's actually the Lookout Wild Film Festival that's tonight, And tomorrow night is when we're doing that River Radius podcast, so those 30 people that went running out there to go catch it. And wait 24 hours. Here you go.
Hey. I'm Matt Fisher with Allegheny Outdoors in Allegheny County, Virginia. It's kind of an underserviced, underrepresented area there. I kind of have a bunch of questions because I'm kind of new to it, and so is the County of Allegheny really dealing in with recreation, outdoor recreation. We're dam fed there by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers Gathright Dam, and there's a lake there owned by the Federal Forest, or Federal Service. One of the main questions I have there is we've kind of pushed for 6 years now to get some kind of difference made or changes made in how they're making that dam augmentation flow. So typically they're releasing about 250 to 300 CFS, which keeps us navigable all year round. But then they do these pulse releases, and long story short on that, it is for the solution is pollution dilution, the paper mill, West Rock, Mead, or now it's Smurfit West Rock is right downstream. They finally kind of said, yes, that's what we're doing. We've admitted to that. It was initially put there to be cold water flow for trout streams. And we dealt with the King's Grant. We still deal with that. And it's a navigable river. So that's another question on another time I have for you guys. How do we deal with that? The other side of it is we've tried to push for this to help them understand there's recreational opportunities if they were to do these dam augmentation flows at times where we can use it as a recreational service. There's a gorge downstream of us that becomes a class 2, 3, about 3 miles, 4 miles of that. They don't release it at a time, well, they release it on a Wednesday during the morning, and it doesn't hit down to that dam down to that gorge until about 6:30. So you could run it in July if you're lucky to hit the main part of it. I've had whitewater guys there, American Whitewater Association, those people, they've kind of ran it. It's a really good run, so I think it's something that, again, it could be a great recreational opportunity there for them. All those people, 30, 40 people, all go to a restaurant, yada, yada, yada. So we've been advocating for that for almost 6 years. It's gotten some traction, but the problem is with it, and I know you guys, everybody's hands tied, every time you do something in the federal forest, it takes 2 years to even think, all right, there's a 2-year study to see if we can even implement this. That's just the recreational side of whitewater. If you get into the fishing side of it, they're releasing in October. It's the brown spawn is there. That blows my mind that they've done that for many years, and that's the brown trout. They're spawning then. They do it in the early spring. We have rainbow there. We have migratory waterfowl. It's just so much it doesn't make sense. I don't think I mentioned it goes from 230 to 3,500 CFS in a 4-hour span. That's a lot of rain, so I guess my question is, and it doesn't sound like you guys have that, you advocates, but you don't have the direct line. How do we get something like that fast-tracked? I know you said something about where you guys are looking to fast-track recreational opportunities and enhancements. Is that something that could be on that table there where we look at that and say, hey, let's really fast-track this because it could provide X amount of revenue or this coming in here? We're not killing the brown trout.
I'll take a crack. Yeah, it's a good question. I think I feel like that's a common question that a lot of counties are trying to start with is there's a resource here, and how do we figure out how to turn it into these success stories we're seeing on Outside Magazine or whatever your thing is. So the first thing, it sounds like we need a conversation with the Corps, whoever's the head of the local Corps of Engineers office. I don't have any connections with those folks, but if I was in your shoes, I would try and think about that. It sounds like you're getting some nonprofit associations in there to help do some connection building.
With the Corps, and it's I don't know if the House vote is Senate floor now, but it's getting ready to be passed. But we're talking about a 2-year study to show,
Yeah.
stop that flow. It's one of those things. So many reasons you see right in front of you. Why is that? A 2-year study.
Yeah.
It was done to scour the bottom of the rivers and get the Diddy Moe out of there. They've been doing it for 10 years. The Diddy Moe's worse than that. So.
Yeah. My only last piece of advice, and I have lost track a little bit of whether Virginia has a state office of outdoor recreation. They don't. Okay, well then that is bad advice. And then the only other thing I can think of, I think the cycle has been missed, but there is, I think it's going to happen again next year, but there is a grant opportunity that's a partnership between the Forest Service, the EPA, and one other organization that's about giving grants out to rural economies for recreation. Like, how do you start doing the initial planning to advocate for yourself and for your industry in that area? RERC grants. And so I think we just announced who the latest recipients are this year, so that might be something to think about for subsequent years, of just getting that initial infusion of resources to start having those deliberate conversations in the area.